Welcome back, friends. Tonight, I invite you to slow down, get comfortable, and let your mind drift far away from the noise of the modern world. We are taking a soft step into the past, into an age without screens, without engines, without the constant hum of information, yet full of life, laughter, superstition, and some truly unexpected hobbies. This is the Middle Ages, but not the version of kings, wars, and dusty chronicles you might remember from school. Tonight, we are wandering into its quieter corners, the places where ordinary people tried to cure boredom, chase joy, and make meaning in a world that was often unpredictable, uncomfortable, and wonderfully odd. Now, if you are listening in bed, feel free to let your eyes grow heavy. And if you are listening from a couch, a hammock, or on a late-night walk, take a deep breath and settle in at your own pace. There will be no battles in this chapter, no villains, no clashing armies. Just the gentle pulse of village life, lit by candlelight and warmed by hearth fires, carried forward by imagination and a bit of curiosity. Before we begin, picture this. It is early morning in a medieval village. The sun lifts slowly over rolling hills, and a thin ribbon of smoke curls upward from thatched rooftops. The air smells of damp earth, wood ash, and the faint sweetness of rye bread baking in clay ovens. Chickens wander freely between cottages. A dog is already scratching at a door, and summer, though not always on time, a rooster debates whether today is worth shouting about. There are no alarms, only habits that have become rituals. A mother stirs a pot of porridge, a shepherd rubs sleep from his eyes, and a baker's apprentice tries very hard not to drop anything on his way to the oven. Life is slow, repetitive, sometimes harsh. And yet, within that simplicity, people still sought moments of delight. They invented games. They built traditions. They found excuses to celebrate, to gather, to gossip, and to laugh even when the jokes were terrible, even when the entertainment involved pigs, cheese, or questionable athletic decisions. That is the part of history we are exploring tonight, the playful pulse of medieval life. Because as strange as their customs may seem to us now, they were born from the same spark we carry today, the desire to belong, to break boredom, and to feel a little more alive. Imagine living in a world with no Netflix, no novels for the common folk, no headphones, no weekend trips, no electric lights, and no easy way to escape routine. Entertainment was not delivered. It was created. People gathered in taverns to hear traveling storytellers. They held absurd contests in the village square. They used superstition the way we use emoji simple, shared symbols that added color to daily existence. Sometimes it was wholesome. Sometimes it was chaotic. Sometimes it was just bizarre. But it was always human. And that is why their stories are worth retelling. Not to laugh at the past, but to understand it and maybe, in the process, understand ourselves a little better too. As the morning stretches on in our imagined village, the day unfolds with a rhythm that has existed for generations. The blacksmith prepares his forge. The priest rehearses a sermon that may or may not stay on script. Laundry hangs in uneven rows like prayer flags for the wind. A few old women gather at the well, where the real news network of the village begins. They trade stories, secrets, and suspicions with the sharp efficiency of experts. No parchment, no ink, just memory and enthusiasm. If you want to know who is courting whom, who burned their stew, who borrowed what and did not return it, or whose goat has been behaving suspiciously, the well is the place to listen. Meanwhile, children are shooed outside with vague instructions like be useful, which immediately turns into anything but usefulness. After all, this is a world with no toys, no playgrounds, and no supervision after the first 5 minutes. Their games are invented on the spot, rock-tossing competitions, dramatic pretend battles, turnip wars, and contests of who can fall over most theatrically. If an adult glances over and sees them working, that is merely coincidence. By midday, chores continue, meals are scavenged or simmered, and life flows forward without hurry. Yet as simple as it seems, the day is never empty. Evenings bring stories by the fire, songs in uneven melodies, and on special occasions, festivals that begin for reasons no one remembers and end for reasons no one explains. People cheer, dance, laugh, and try to forget for a moment how heavy life can be. So tonight, we will walk through this world together. We will explore strange medieval amusements, from playful to absurd, from joyful to questionable. We will visit the muddy streets, the smoky hearths, the loud taverns, and the moonlit meadows where secrets are whispered. We will meet the villagers not as nameless figures from history books, but as real, breathing personalities with quirks, frustrations, and dreams. Their lives were shorter. Their world was harder. But their desire to connect, to laugh, to escape boredom that is timeless. So take one more slow breath. Let your muscles soften. Let the images form at their own pace, like ink spreading across parchment. Tonight, we are stepping into a story where nothing moves too fast, where the candlelight is warm, where curiosity leads the way, and where even the strangest traditions have a heartbeat behind them. When you are ready, we will begin our journey into the peculiar pleasures and playful pastimes of medieval life. Morning in the village did not arrive swiftly. It eased in, stretching itself across the rooftops and drifting lazily into windows that never quite shut properly. There were no clocks, and there was no rush. People woke because light touched their eyelids, or because a sheep bleated into the wrong doorway, or because someone dropped a bucket somewhere and blamed it on destiny. As the sun slowly brightened the crooked lanes, the village began its clumsy ritual of waking up. A few men stumbled toward the water barrels to splash their faces, gasping at the cold as if it had insulted them personally. A woman hanging laundry muttered to herself about weather, fate, and whichever child misplaced her only good clothespin. A dog stretched, sneezed, and immediately trotted off to start arguments with chickens. It was not elegance, but it was life. And beneath it all, there was a quiet rhythm, one that had not changed in generations. You worked, you endured, and you found little ways to make the day lighter, even if only for a few minutes at a time. Hygiene, for example, was less of a requirement and more of a competitive suggestion. Some villagers believed cold water strengthened the spirit. Others believed water weakened the body and should be avoided unless absolutely necessary. Soap was homemade, a harsh mixture that scrubbed away dirt, pride, and occasionally skin. Teeth were cleaned with ash, herbs, or sheer optimism. A few adventurous souls rubbed mint leaves against their gums, claiming it freshened the breath. The results were debatable, but the confidence was impressive. Inside the cottages, breakfasts were simple porridge thick enough to mortar stones, bread that could double as a weapon, or a sliver of cheese whose age no one dared calculate. Meals were eaten quickly, because chores waited, animals wandered, and tools never stayed in the place where tools were supposed to be. Yet even in these routines, humor bloomed. A husband might pretend his porridge was poison, earning only an eye roll from his wife. A child might swear that a crust had cracked his tooth, earning sympathy from no one. Life was repetitive, but never entirely predictable. And in between the chores, between sweeping, feeding, hauling, mending, stitching, patching, cooking, fetching, tending, and sighing, people looked for their small windows of joy. That is where the strange fun began. But before games or festivals or mischief could happen, there was always the gossip. Gossip was not a hobby in medieval villages, it was a sport, played daily with sharp instincts and impressive stamina. And the well in the center of the village was its official stadium. As soon as chores paused even for a heartbeat, the well attracted an audience. Elderly women, young wives, overworked fathers, curious children pretending not to listen, everyone eventually passed through and contributed to the ongoing commentary of village life. A dropped hint here, a raised eyebrow there, and suddenly a story began to grow wings. Did you hear about the baker's apprentice? One voice would begin. Did you see what the cooper's wife was wearing? Another would add. It did not matter if the details were accurate. In a world with no books for the common folk, no plays, no printed entertainments, and no distractions, human behavior was the greatest drama available. The well gave them amusement, connection, and a sense of belonging. And if the rumors occasionally wandered into questionable territory, well, that was just part of the fun. Once chores resumed, the entertainment shifted to a different stage, the fields, the workshops, and the muddy streets, where daily life rolled forward in all its clumsy dignity. The blacksmith's hammer became the percussion of the village. The baa of sheep and the cluck of chickens became background vocals. Every sound was part of an unending, unscripted performance. Children provided the comedy. Sent to gather weeds or collect eggs, they inevitably invented adventures instead. A stick became a sword. A cabbage became treasure. A puddle became a battlefield. They launched themselves into imagination with enthusiasm so powerful that even disappointed parents could not fully extinguish it. Adults had far fewer chances to be playful, but they stole moments where they could. A shared joke over a fence. A dramatic sigh during laundry. An exaggerated story told in the tavern just to see who would believe it. And when the day grew long, there was always something to look forward to, an evening story, a visiting minstrel, or a makeshift competition with questionable rules. Because here is the truth, without entertainment, the medieval day would have been unbearable. Life was heavy, full of labor, sickness, uncertainty, and endless repetition. So people created joy the way they created everything else by hand, from scratch, using whatever they had. Sometimes that joy was wholesome. Sometimes it was absolutely ridiculous. But it kept them going. So now that our village is awake, fed, dressed, and fully involved in its daily rhythm, we can finally walk deeper into what you came for, the bizarre, amusing, and wonderfully strange things medieval people did for fun. From odd competitions to chaotic festivals, from public amusements to private mischief, this world is filled with surprises. Take a slow breath. Let the morning light settle in your mind. We have set the stage. The village is alive. And now, it is time to peek into the medieval imagination where boredom met creativity and entertainment took forms that will make you smile, raise an eyebrow, or occasionally question humanity entirely. As the sun climbed a little higher and the morning haze lifted from the fields, the village began to lean toward the part of the day everyone secretly looked forward to, not meals, not prayers, and certainly not chores, but distraction. For medieval people, boredom was a familiar companion, and they battled it with imagination far more inventive than ours. With almost nothing to work with, no stages, no stadiums, and no screens, they turned everyday life into entertainment. One of the simplest And somehow most beloved amusements was competitive nonsense. People would invent contests on the spot, with rules that were thin, flexible, or completely ignored. A pig might be released in the village square, and whoever caught it kept it, though catching a pig coated in mud turned out to be an event equal parts sport, chaos, and comedy. The crowd would cheer, laugh, and occasionally run for safety as the muddy animal zigzagged through legs, skirts, baskets, and someone's drying laundry. On quieter days, they held sack races, stick duels, or rolling barrel challenges, shouting encouragement or playful insults from the sidelines. Cheating was expected. Protests were loud. And yet, somehow, everyone left happier than when they arrived. But while the children and younger villagers occupied themselves with sprints and wrestling matches, the older folks preferred a different arena entirely, the art of watching and talking. For them, gossip was not merely a habit. It was entertainment performed daily with expert timing, dramatic pauses, and raised eyebrows that could cut deeper than any blade. They gathered at the well, the tavern door, or beside a laundry line, and from these corners emerged rumors, stories, suspicions, jokes, and occasionally legends that would outlive their original subjects. If a man limped one morning, 3 explanations would bloom by sunset. The truth, a wildly exaggerated version, and a version involving goats. The point was never accuracy. The point was the performance. Meanwhile, for those who preferred a stage, there were traveling entertainers, minstrels, jugglers, performers, and storytellers who drifted between villages like petals on a traveling breeze. Villagers would gather beneath a tree or beside the communal hall and listen as a stranger spun exaggerated tales about distant lands, heroic knights, mischievous spirits, and battles that almost certainly never happened the way he described. The accuracy did not matter. His voice was his ticket. His lute or fiddle was his invitation. And for one evening, the village could forget about aching backs, broken tools, or stubborn crops. Then, of course, came the games of chance. Medieval people had an astonishing tolerance for extremely unfair odds. Dice carved from bone, pebbles used as tokens, nutshells, hiding stones, simple games played on barrels, tabletops, or the bare ground. There were no casinos. Instead, there were dimly lit corners of taverns where men leaned close, muttered superstitions, and swore the dice were bewitched by fate, fortune, saints, or demons, whichever excuse was more convenient. Winning might earn a scrap of food or a mug of ale. Losing usually earned an evening of dramatic sulking. Not every pastime was chaotic or competitive, though. Some amusements were gentle and quiet, especially in the evenings. After supper, when lanterns glowed and smoke curled from chimneys, villagers often gathered around fires to share stories. Some were humorous tales of clumsy neighbors. Some were romantic, whispered with soft smiles and lowered eyes. And some were ghost stories, told just slowly enough to make a child inch closer to the nearest adult. Storytelling nights were communal warmth, where no one was left out. Even shy souls who said little during the day would lean forward, eyes reflecting the fire, letting imagination take them somewhere beyond their small patch of earth. As the week went on, a different kind of entertainment awaited, the market day or fair day, when neighbors from nearby hamlets gathered. Music, dancing, juggling, mock duels, singing contests, and even animal parades filled the air with life. A man might balance on a barrel. A girl might try to charm a chicken into sitting still long enough to win a ribbon. Someone played a fiddle slightly out of tune. Someone else attempted a flute with even worse results. The audience laughed, clapped, and pretended not to notice when things descended into cheerful disaster. Village dances were not elegant courtly affairs. They were unchoreographed blurs of stomping feet, linked hands, spinning skirts, and breathless laughter. No one cared who misstepped. No one cared who forgot the pattern. The point was to move, to feel part of something shared, and to remind themselves that they were alive, here, now for another day. Despite the hardships that shadowed their world harvest failures, sickness, storms, uncertainty, villagers still reached for joy with surprising determination. And perhaps that is the most striking thing about their amusements. They did not have much, but they used what they had: a stick, a song, a rumor, a roast onion passed around a fire, a muddy pig on the run. Their world was small, but their imagination was enormous. So, as the day lengthened and the sun inched westward, the village prepared for the next round of diversions, games, gatherings, and rituals that might look absurd to us now, yet meant everything to them. Fun was not a luxury. It was a survival tool. Without it, the days would have been too heavy. With it, even the mud felt lighter beneath their feet. And as shadows began to stretch across the lanes once more, the villagers were already thinking what game tonight, what story, what small delight could brighten the long hours before sleep. Because in the medieval world, joy did not arrive on its own. It had to be invented. As afternoon stretched across the village and shadows softened along the crooked fences, the rhythm of work began to loosen. Tools were set aside. Baskets were stacked. Cloaks were hung. And with chores paused, people drifted toward their favorite pastime of all, watching each other live. For the medieval villagers, entertainment did not always require props, music, or crowds. Often, the stage was nothing more than a sunny spot near the well, and the performers were simply everyday people going about their business. The villagers gathered not to applaud, but to observe, comment, and gently judge, because in a world with few distractions, spectacle could be found in anything, if one watched closely enough. Near the center of the village stood a familiar formation, a semicircle of older women, bundled in layers of wool and wrapped in layers of opinion. These were the unofficial chroniclers, comedians, critics, and commentators of village life. They never charged admission, yet their performances drew an audience all the same. They watched everything. If the baker's wife walked by in a brighter dress than usual, there would be whispers. Had she received a gift? From whom? And why did she smile that particular smile when she passed the cooper's gate? If a young man limped down the lane, there would be theories. Had he fallen? Was he injured? Or, and this was always the favorite possibility, had he been up to something he did not want to share? Their words fluttered like sparrows, soft and constant. Not cruel, not truly. Just curious, playful, and seasoned with wit sharpened by years of observing the same neighbors, repeating the same mistakes. To them, gossip was a hobby, an art, and occasionally a sport. Children, sensing drama, lingered nearby, pretending to chase a pebble or play with a stick, but really listening with wide, unblinking eyes. Gossip was their bedtime story, their education, and their favorite puzzle. They did not always understand it, but they remembered every detail. Across the square, another group gathered, the men sitting on overturned barrels near the tavern wall. Their pastime was slower, quieter, and fueled by a sense of exaggerated importance. They spoke of deep matters, weather forecasts based on pure emotion, political theories inspired by absolutely no information, and bold strategies for fixing the village that none of them would ever attempt. If the women at the well were a lively play, the men's bench was a slow-moving philosophical lecture, with long pauses, many sighs, and the occasional distraction whenever a dog wandered by. Their joy came not from action, but from the ritual of being witnessed, as though simply sitting in the same spot at the same hour proved their usefulness to the universe. Nearby, children found entertainment in mischief. They invented games of mimicry, spying, and silent dares. They watched the adults as if studying for a future they were in no hurry to reach. And when anything unusual happened, a hat blown away by wind, a goat escaping its pen, a man dropping a bucket, the children were the first to react, laughing freely, delighted by the smallest rupture in routine. Even the animals unintentionally became part of the amusement. A pig wandering into a cabbage patch could attract half the village, not to help, but to watch. A cow refusing to move was a front-row show. A goose chasing a grown adult was an all-day comedy festival. Medieval life was participatory theater, and everyone, willing or not, played a role. Yet the most specialized performer of all was the village storyteller, usually an older soul, who had seen too much to panic and remembered too much to stay silent. In the afternoons, when work slowed, he would sit by the well or beneath the shade of a crooked tree. One by one, villagers would gather around, drawn not by a bell or announcement, but by instinct and anticipation. His tales were rarely factual. They were embroidered, exaggerated, and occasionally invented on the spot. He might describe a neighbor's clumsy accident with such dramatic flair that even the victim would end up laughing. Or he might retell a simple event, a rooster refusing to crow, with poetic weight, turning inconvenience into legend. These stories traveled, returned, changed shape, and eventually became communal folklore. The storyteller never corrected the new versions. Why would he? In a world short on entertainment, truth was less valuable than enjoyment. All of these small rituals, the gossip, the sitting, the watching, the retelling, formed a kind of amusement that cost no coin and required no planning. It reminded people that they were part of something shared, something continuously unfolding, even on the dullest days. But as the light began to soften and the sun crept lower, the appetite for merriment only grew. People were not content with small amusements forever. The day still had energy to burn and laughter to chase. Soon, someone would suggest a game, a contest, or a challenge. And laughter, real, unrestrained laughter, would ripple across the square like birds taking flight. Because in a medieval village, entertainment always escalated. And the strangest games were still to come. As the afternoon light mellowed into a warm, golden hush, the villagers' appetite for amusement shifted from quiet observation to something far livelier. It was time for games that were loud, messy, ridiculous, and absolutely cherished. For medieval people, fun was not delicate. It was muddy, chaotic, improvised, and joyful in its own unpolished way. One of the most beloved entertainments in many regions was pig racing. It required no training, no skill, and absolutely no dignity. A pig, plump and pink and extremely uncooperative, would be set loose in an open patch of village ground. Men, boys, and the occasional overly confident aunt would line up, ready to chase it. The rules were simple: catch the pig, keep the pig. But pigs, it turns out, are faster, slipperier, louder, and bolder than most people expect. When startled, a pig can zig, zag, and scream like a warrior of chaos. The race rarely lasted long, but the laughter did. The losers were muddy. The winners were muddy. The pig was muddy. But everyone, somehow, felt triumphant. If pigs provided speed, cheese provided spectacle. In some regions, villagers would hold a contest in which a wheel of cheese large, heavy, and poorly balanced was rolled down the steepest hill they could find. Contestants hurled themselves after it, arms flailing, legs scrambling, dignity abandoned at the first tumble. The cheese did not care who chased it. It rolled with merciless enthusiasm. Many fell. Some rolled. A rare few ran the whole way down without collapsing into a heap. Whoever touched the cheese first earned the prize and the bragging rights. Whether the cheese itself survived the journey in edible form was another matter entirely. But victory always tasted fantastic. Then there were the mock battles and wrestling bouts, where strength was measured not by trophies, but by how loudly the crowd gasped. Wrestling matches were theatrical, challengers circling each other in the dust, villagers chanting, children climbing fence rails just to see, and someone's grandmother heckling both sides with fearless commentary. These matches ended with bruises, sore elbows, and exaggerated limps that lasted days. But they also ended with smiles. In a world where life was heavy, laughter was the only light armor people had. And sometimes the entertainment drifted into truly peculiar territory. In certain places, there were contests that modern ears can scarcely believe. Fooling contests, where men tried to out-silly each other with jokes, gestures, or strange noises. Endurance contests, where participants held uncomfortable poses simply to prove they could. And yes, whispered, in some corners of medieval lore, there were even flatulence contests, in which the winner was not necessarily the loudest, but the most memorable. The crowd watched. The crowd judged. The crowd laughed until their ribs hurt, and afterward everyone pretended it had never happened. Animals, unsurprisingly, played a starring role in many amusements. Geese were chased, goats were coaxed into races, and in one strange custom recorded in a few villages, a rooster was tied to a rope and riders on horseback attempted to grab at a pastime that required speed, balance, and questionable decision-making. Thankfully, kinder variations eventually replaced harsher ones, but in older times, entertainment was not always gentle, and mercy was not always the priority. Even so, villagers rarely thought of these games as cruel. To them, they were traditions part of the rhythm of the year, as expected as the harvest. Yet not all medieval amusements were wild. Some were surprisingly whimsical. Villagers loved story riddles, challenging each other with clever puzzles or humorous questions. They played board games carved from wood or bone, precursors to checkers and backgammon. They enjoyed dice games, even though everyone swore they were cursed. And in the evenings, when people gathered after supper, someone might bring out a simple instrument, a flute, a drum, a fiddle missing one string, and soon the square would fill with clapping, stomping, and off-key singing that nobody minded. Festivals amplified everything. What was ordinary became extravagant. What was small became loud. A simple race turned into an annual rivalry. A juggling trick became a story retold for months. A spontaneous dance became a cherished memory. The air shimmered with energy, with music, with the feeling that for one bright moment, the world could be bigger than hunger, chores, or cold nights. These amusements, strange as they seem to us now, served a purpose. They were release valves. Life in the Middle Ages was demanding. Work did not stop. Seasons did not forgive. Illness did not wait. But for an hour or a day, or an evening lit by torches and moonlight, people could escape. They could laugh. They could belong to something shared. And that is the heart of medieval entertainment, not the absurdity, not the mud, not the cheese rolling down a hill, but the togetherness. Fun was never solitary. Joy was never private. People experienced it shoulder to shoulder, voices overlapping, hands clapping, feet chasing, hearts thumping in unison. Perhaps that is what they understood better than we do, that entertainment is not just distraction. It is connection. As the last cheese will tumbled, the last pig squealed, and the last wrestler limped home proudly, the village settled into that golden hour before dusk, the sky blushing pink and the fields humming with quiet contentment. There was more fun to be had after sunset, more rituals, more stories, more strange amusements waiting in the dark. But those would come soon enough, because in the Middle Ages, the night was its own theater. When the sun finally slipped behind the hills and the last streaks of daylight melted into blue, the village changed its rhythm. Work belonged to the day. Night, however, belonged to imagination. For medieval people who lived without lantern-lit streets or glowing windows, darkness did not end the day, it transformed it. The fields rested, the tools slept, and in that pause, the villagers reached for a different kind of joy, the quiet, communal magic of nighttime fun. Fires were the first signal that evening entertainment had begun. Small flames sparked to life across the village, like stars being lit on the ground. A family tended their hearth. A neighbor carried embers to a clay pit. Near the tavern, a larger bonfire crackled and popped, calling people toward its warmth. Night could be cold, heavy, or frightening if faced alone. But a shared fire turned it into something softer, something almost welcoming. It was around these flames that the oldest form of entertainment flourished, storytelling. Not the rushed storytelling of daylight gossip, but slow, unrushed tales told by firelight, where each word had space to breathe. The storyteller, sometimes a wanderer, sometimes an elder, sometimes simply whoever had inspiration that evening, would clear his throat, lean forward, and begin. The stories drifted anywhere they pleased. Some spoke of ancient heroes and forgotten kingdoms. Others told of mischievous spirits who lived in wells, forests, or attics, listening to conversations and borrowing shoes. There were tales of lost love, foolish knights, enchanted animals, and ghosts that taught lessons rather than fear. The children listened wide-eyed, fighting sleep, clutching blankets or crusts of bread. Adults leaned in quietly, pretending they were only there to humor the children, when really they too needed escape. When words grew tired, music took over. A fiddle, a drum, a pipe carved from reed, no orchestra, no polish, just rhythm. Someone stamped a foot. Someone clapped. Someone with a voice that wavered like candlelight sang a familiar tune that everyone, eventually, hummed along to. Music, in those moments, stitched hearts together more tightly than thread ever could. For those who preferred movement over melody, there were night dances. Clumsy, barefoot circles in the grass. Couples learning steps they would instantly forget. Children spinning until they dropped. No choreography. No audience. Just flickering fire and swaying shadows, with laughter drifting upward like sparks. And then came the night games, perhaps the most cherished of all. Some villages played shadow tag, where children darted between torchlight and darkness, daring each other to step into patches of moonlit mystery. Others played wolf and shepherd, where one child pretended to be a wolf sneaking toward a flock, while the shepherd tried to protect them. Adults joined too, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes eagerly, always pretending they did not enjoy it as much as the children, though they did. Then there were the games meant for older participants, quiet competitions of wit or chance, played with dice, carved tokens, or riddles that grew harder as the night deepened. People bet nothing of value, yet cared deeply about winning, as though victory itself could sweeten tomorrow's chores. But not every nighttime amusement was loud or lively. Some moments were just, gentle. A girl sitting with her friend, sharing secrets in whispers so soft even the wind could not steal them. A young couple walking the edge of the meadow, speaking not of chores or hunger, but of dreams, small dreams, modest dreams, yet precious because they were shared. A mother humming a lullaby as she braided her daughter's hair by firelight. A man sitting quietly with his aging father, enjoying silence as though it, too, was a story. The moon watched it all, calm, patient, steady, draping the village in silver. In a world without lamps or screens, moonlight was entertainment in its own right. Some villagers swore the moon changed people, making children rowdy, dogs restless, and romantics even more dramatic than usual. Others simply sat on wooden steps, gazing upward, letting their thoughts drift like clouds. And when the fire shrank into glowing embers and yawns began to spread, the villagers made their slow goodbyes. Some headed home in pairs, leaning on each other. Others walked alone, guided by memory and moonlight. The night became quieter, first like a song, slowing down, then like a sigh. Inside huts and cottages, the world shrank once more to the soft scratch of straw mattresses, the rustle of wool blankets, and the sounds of breaths settling into sleep. Outside, only the watchful barn animals, the creaking fences, and the distant hoot of an owl remained awake. To us, the night might seem empty, but to the medieval villagers, it had given them something priceless. Connection, comfort, and a few hours of shared humanity. No decorations, no stage, no fancy tools, just fire, voices, and togetherness. It was not entertainment designed to impress. It was entertainment designed to belong. And in the Middle Ages, belonging was everything. As the night settled fully over the village and distant laughter faded into memory, life retreated indoors. One by one, wooden doors closed with soft thuds, candles were trimmed, and firelight became the heart of each home. Medieval nights were long, especially in winter, and villagers learned to fill those hours with gentle rituals, quiet hobbies, and the simple comfort of being together. Inside a small cottage, the hearth glowed low, flickering gold against rough timber walls. A pot, long emptied of stew, hung over warm coals, releasing the faint scent of herbs and onions. Parents sat close to the fire, not just for warmth, but because heat was treasured and light even more so. Darkness pressed against the windows, thick and silent, and the flames felt like a guardian standing watch. On the floor, children fidgeted sleepily on straw stuffed mats. With their energy nearly drained from a day of running, racing, and inventing nonsense, even the most restless pair of feet slowed. Before sleep, though, there was always a little time for small amusements, the private nighttime joys that never made it into official histories. Some families played simple indoor games, using whatever they had, pebbles arranged in squares, sticks used like markers, or bones carved with dots. Every cottage had its own rules. Every game had its own tradition. Children smiled when they won and pouted dramatically when they did not, while parents pretended the outcomes mattered more than they truly did. Others passed the time with tiny crafts. A father mended a broken stool. A mother braided cord from scraps of wool. An older brother carved a small toy from leftover wood. These were not chores. Not at night, they were quiet rituals, actions that soothed the mind. The rhythmic scrape of a knife, the soft pull of thread, the snap of a twig fitting into place. These sounds were the lullabies of adulthood. Conversation drifted slowly, without urgency. Families spoke of the day's small events, who said what, who fell in the mud, who laughed, who surprised them. They wondered about tomorrow's weather, tomorrow's tasks, tomorrow's hopes. Even in hard times, there was comfort in imagining the next sunrise. And then came the stories, not community legends, not dramatic tales for a crowd, but personal stories, passed down through blood and memory. A mother might tell her children about her grandmother, who danced barefoot in a storm. A father might whisper about a journey he made when he was young, walking farther than his children could imagine. These stories were gifts, threads of identity, stitching one generation to the next. When voices grew softer and eyelids heavier, homes turned to their final entertainments, the thoughts that visit just before sleep. The Middle Ages were full of uncertainty, and nights could stir quiet reflections. A young woman lying on her straw mattress might hold a secret hope in her chest, wondering whether a certain boy would speak to her at the next market. A tired farmer might stare at the ceiling rafters, calculating how many days remained before the next harvest, wishing for good weather and a little luck. A child might whisper a prayer for a new pair of shoes, or a sweeter breakfast, or simply fewer chores. In those moments, the simplest joys became treasures. Comfort did not come from luxury, it came from nearness. A shared blanket, a hand brushed gently across a child's hair, the familiar sound of a loved one breathing nearby. Even the snoring, ridiculous as it was, became part of the music of safety. For many, the greatest joy of the night was not laughter, but belonging. There were nights, too, when silence was broken by soft giggles, siblings whispering under blankets, telling jokes, sharing secrets, or inventing fantastical futures. In a world with few possessions, imagination became their most loyal toy. Sometimes, a home would still be awake after others slept, especially if someone had a restless mind. A mother rocking a baby who refused to settle. A shepherd polishing a tool by firelight. A grandmother humming to the coals, unable to sleep but unwilling to wake anyone else. These late hours were peaceful in their own way, a quiet space where thoughts could wander freely. Outside, the world lay still. The village, so noisy by day, became a single slow breath. Dogs curled near doorsteps. Chickens tucked heads beneath wings. Roofs creaked. Trees whispered. And above it all, stars watched in ancient silence. Eventually, even the last ember in the last cottage sighed into darkness. One by one, consciousness faded, and dreams took over. Dreams of harvests and hearts, of dances and festivals, of cheeses rolling down hills and pigs outrunning glory. Dreams that made no sense, yet felt perfectly at home in the medieval imagination. And so, beneath blankets of wool and straw, the villagers surrendered to sleep, unaware that tomorrow would begin its dance all over again with muddy boots, stubborn bread, gossip at the well, and entertainment in the oddest forms. It was not a grand life. It was not a comfortable life. But it was a fully human life, and joy, however small, was always found by those who went looking for it, especially after sunset. As the seasons turned, the village discovered its grandest source of joy: festivals. If daily amusements brought small sparks of laughter, then the festivals scattered through the year were blazing fires of celebration, anticipation, and togetherness. These events were not merely diversions. They were anchors in time, marking the rhythm of life, reminding the villagers that no matter how heavy the months had been, there would always be a day to pause, to gather, and to feel part of something larger than themselves. Festivals were tied to the land, to faith, and to the sky above. When winter finally released its grip, and the first hints of green awakened beneath melting snow, the spring festival arrived. Villagers decorated doorways with branches and flowers, believing they invited fortune into their homes. Children ran with ribbons, weaving patterns through the square, while adults sang slow, hopeful songs that had been passed down longer than anyone could remember. It was a celebration not of wealth or luxury, but simply of survival, of reaching another spring, of feeling the sun again. Summer brought livelier gatherings. The days were long, the fields were bright, and the air carried the scent of wild herbs. Musicians roamed from hamlet to hamlet, their melodies drifting ahead of them like a promise. Villagers feasted on whatever the season offered: bread, berries, cheese, honey, and mead that made even the shyest souls bold enough to dance. Bonfires rose taller in summer, and their crackling glow lit up the faces of people who, on ordinary days, hardly spoke beyond necessity. In the firelight, they laughed more freely. They forgot debts, quarrels, and chores. For one night, life felt generous. Autumn celebrations, meanwhile, were grounded in gratitude. The harvest festival was perhaps the most important of the year. Everything depended on those crops. A good harvest meant full bowls, warm homes, and calmer hearts through winter. A poor harvest meant worry. But regardless of yield, the villagers gathered to honor the earth. Long tables were set outdoors. The last apples, the freshest loaves, the fattest onions, and the most treasured herbs were placed together as symbols of hope. The meal was simple, but the meaning was rich. As elders gave toasts and children played in piles of straw, everyone understood that they were feasting not just on food, but on relief. Even winter, cold and consuming, held its own holidays filled with candles, carols, and evergreen sprigs tucked behind shutters to ward off misfortune. On the longest nights, villagers huddled together in the hall near the tavern or inside the chapel, singing gently while snow tapped against the roof. These winter celebrations were not loud. They were soft, comforting, and tender, reminding people that warmth could be shared even when wood was scarce and daylight brief. Yet festivals were not only about seasons. Some celebrated saints. Some honored old customs that even the elders could not fully explain. In certain places, masked dances were held at night, as villagers believed spirits passed closer to the living at particular times of year. Rather than fear the unseen, they amused themselves by reenacting stories half sacred, half humorous, where someone always tripped over a robe, forgot a line, or lost a shoe in the mud. Laughter, it seemed, was the most potent charm against darkness. And then there were tournaments and grand competitions. Even in small villages, people invented their own versions of noble games. There were archery fields marked in crooked lines, tree stumps turned into jousting dummies, and grassy lanes dedicated to foot races or mock duels. Strength, speed, and bravery were honored, but not in a solemn way. Triumph was celebrated. Defeat was teased. And glory lasted precisely until the next festival came around and crowned someone new. Beneath all these events lay a deeper truth. Festivals gave meaning to time. Without them, days would blur one chore, heavy mourning collapsing into the next. But a festival gave the villagers something to anticipate, something to remember, and something to retell by the fire. Children counted nights until the next feast. Adults prepared clothes, songs, dishes, and jokes. Even the animals sensed the shift, unsettled by the unusual excitement in the air. Festivals carried spiritual weight as well. Before feasts, priests blessed the fields, the bread, and sometimes the very ground of the village. People bowed their heads, murmured prayers, and believed, if only for a moment, that the universe was listening. Faith and festivity were woven tightly together back then. Gratitude, joy, superstition, and reverence, none of them stood alone. And when a festival ended, when the banners were taken down and the torches burned out, the village did not feel emptier. Instead, it felt renewed, as though the celebration had left a warm ember in each heart, glowing quietly through the ordinary days that followed. Because the joy of medieval festivals was not the noise, nor the dancing, nor the contests. It was the reminder that life, for all its hardship, still contained moments worth stopping for. Moments that said, we are still here. We are still together. And that, in their eyes, was reason enough to celebrate. When the last festival songs faded and the seasons continued their steady procession, there remained another source of fascination and quiet amusement in medieval life, the vast, invisible world of faith, superstition, spirits, signs, and wonders. For people who lived before street lamps, science books, or predictable weather forecasts, the night sky and the mysteries of the world offered endless storytelling, curiosity, and entertainment that was as spiritual as it was imaginative. Faith in the Middle Ages was not a distant Sunday ritual. It breathed inside daily life. It shaped how people worked, how they feared, how they hoped, and how they played. Every sunrise felt like a blessing. Every storm felt like a warning. Every illness, every fortune, every coincidence seemed to carry a hidden message worth interpreting. And so, in the evenings when chores were finished and the hearth crackled gently, families sometimes entertained themselves not with games or gossip, but with soft conversations about omens, saints, dreams, and the unseen. Inside the dim glow of a single candle, an entire universe of meaning unfolded. A mother might tell a child that a bird tapping at the window meant news was coming. A grandfather might swear that a sudden cold breeze meant a restless spirit had wandered by. No one could prove these ideas, but that was exactly why they held so much charm. Mystery itself became a form of amusement. The villagers did not question whether unseen forces existed. To them, the world was full of them. The question was simply whether those forces leaned toward kindness or mischief. On certain nights of the year, especially the ones tied to old legends, people gathered not for feasting or dancing, but for rituals of storytelling and watchfulness. They sat beneath the moon or huddled inside the chapel and spoke in low voices about signs, symbols, and otherworldly guests. Children pretended to be brave. Adults pretended not to be scared. Everyone listened. Even the wind seemed to pause. Dreams, too, were a nightly form of entertainment. In a time before printed novels or bedtime screens, dreams were the closest thing to a personal theater. Villagers believed dreams carried meanings, warnings, or divine hints. At breakfast, after tearing bread and sharing porridge, families would trade dreams the way we trade headlines. One person dreamed of a river, perhaps it meant change. Another dreamed of a locked door, surely it foretold a challenge. And the one who dreamed of flying. That story would be retold the entire morning, examined and exaggerated until it became equal parts prophecy and comedy. At other times, villagers found amusement in nighttime rituals meant to invite luck or chase away fear. A branch of evergreen above the door. a whispered prayer before sleep, a candle left burning near a bowl of water, just in case a wandering spirit needed guidance. These gestures were small, but to the medieval imagination, they were powerful. They made the world feel interactive, like the living could negotiate with fate if they tried hard enough. Even the sky was entertainment. The Middle Ages knew no city glow to hide the stars. On clear nights, villagers would gather outside and tilt their faces upward, marveling at constellations they could not name but felt connected to all the same. They believed the heavens carried stories of heroes, of creatures, of gods, of destinies. A shooting star could fuel an entire week of conversation. A full moon could inspire songs, charms, and bold declarations. The villagers did not need to understand the cosmos to enjoy it. Awe was enough, and in awe they found joy. There were, of course, darker amusements too, stories of ghosts, forest spirits, witches, and ancient curses. These tales were thrilling in the safest way, best enjoyed beside a trusted fire with friends nearby. Fear, when shared, became entertainment. Someone would tell of a night they heard footsteps in an empty barn. Someone else swore they saw a light move through the cemetery without a lantern. None of these tales required proof. What mattered was the mood, the delicious shiver, the held breath, the nervous laughter. And when fear became too thick, someone always cracked a joke or spilled a cup, and the spell broke, sending everyone to bed with a smile. Through all these rituals, holy, hopeful, mystical, or absurd, the villagers found a kind of spiritual amusement that balanced their reality. Their lives were not easy. Their futures were uncertain. But the invisible world gave them stories, comfort, and wonder. It gave them something to talk about, something to imagine, and something to believe in when the night felt too long. Long before they slept, long after the fire dimmed, the last conversations of the night were often the softest. A quiet question, a whispered hope, a shared superstition spoken not out of fear, but out of habit. These moments tied families together just as tightly as daylight chores. And as they finally drifted into sleep full of dreams, meanings, and mysteries, they believed the world would watch over them until morning. Whether or not it truly did was not the point. What mattered was that belief itself brought peace. And peace in the Middle Ages was its own form of happiness. As the long tapestry of medieval life unfolds before us, all its muddy games, clumsy contests, candlelit songs, whispered superstitions, shared beds, shared laughter, and shared silence, an unexpected truth begins to glow beneath the surface. For all their odd habits and bizarre entertainments, the people of the Middle Ages were not so different from us. Their world was smaller, their comforts fewer, their tools simpler, and their knowledge limited. Yet what they sought through every festival, every communal game, every fireside story, and every moment of midnight wonder was something profoundly familiar: connection, belonging, and meaning. They chased laughter not because life was light, but because it was heavy. They invented games from nothing because nothing was what they had. They gathered around flames to tell stories because darkness was overwhelming when faced alone. And they found comfort in simple rituals because routine, repetition, and shared belief offered stability against a world they could not control. When we look closely, their peculiar joys begin to make sense. A pig race was not just chaos for chaos' sake, it was a release, a reminder that people could still run, cheer, and feel alive. A wheel of cheese tumbling down a hill was not merely absurd, it was a moment when the entire village laughed in the same direction. The gossip at the well, dramatic as it was, gave people a narrative to hold on to, a sense that their days were part of a larger story. Even their fascination with omens, spirits, and dreams speaks to the same longing we carry now, the desire to believe that life is more than routine, that luck means something, that fate is listening. We have not outgrown that. We have merely changed the symbols. Today, we stream movies instead of gathering at fires. We chase notifications instead of cheese wheels. We follow rumors online instead of at the well. We stare at glowing screens instead of glowing coals. We laugh at videos instead of village fools. But the need, itself the human need to be distracted, delighted, understood, and connected remains exactly the same. Modern life, with all its noise and speed, has given us more entertainment than any medieval villager could imagine. Yet it has also made it easier to be alone in a crowded world, or restless in a comfortable room, or tired even when nothing threatens us. In their slowness, medieval people had something we quietly miss: shared time, shared attention, shared boredom, shared joy. They lived face to face, knee to knee, voice to voice. When something funny happened, everyone saw it. When a story was told, everyone heard the same voice at the same moment, breathing the same air. Time moved at one speed for everyone. There is a strange tenderness in that. And maybe that is the gentle lesson hidden inside those strange old customs. Joy does not require perfection. Happiness does not require abundance. Entertainment does not require complexity. Community does not require convenience. Sometimes all it takes is people being present with one another, fully present, without distraction, willing to play, to laugh, to sing, or simply to sit near the same fire. The Middle Ages remind us that even in a world of hardship, joy can be handmade. It can be humble. It can be a moment, a sound, a shared glance. It can be absurd, even foolish, and still be meaningful. When we peel away the mud, the superstition, and the strangeness, what we find beneath medieval entertainment is not comedy, but humanity. And perhaps, without realizing it, we are still searching for the same things they chased in cobbled squares and grassy fields, to feel less alone, to feel part of something, to feel that life has texture, laughter, rhythm, and memory. So when we laugh at their habits, we also laugh at ourselves. When we find them strange, we remember that people in the future will find us strange in return. And when we see their joy, fragile and homemade, we are reminded that joy has never belonged to any particular century. It is timeless. It survives. It adapts. It waits for us to notice it. Maybe that is why stories like these are worth telling, not because the past was glamorous, but because it was real, imperfect, and fully lived. And in learning how others found joy through limitation, we remember how to find joy through abundance. As our journey begins to bend toward its close, we carry with us one soft realization: technology changes, comforts change, entertainment changes, but people do not change as much as we think. And the heart, through every century, continues to look for the same simple light. And so, as our long wandering through medieval days and medieval dreams approaches its final quiet hours, the village returns once more tonight. The sky has deepened into a soft, endless dark, and the world outside each small cottage has grown still. The fires in the square have faded to ash, the songs have drifted away on the wind, and the last echoes of laughter have dissolved into silence. What remains now is a kind of peaceful emptiness, the slow, closing breath of a day that has been fully lived in its own simple, peculiar way. Inside the cottages, candles burn low, pools of amber light trembling gently across wooden walls scarred by time and use. Children, worn out from games and stories and too much running, have surrendered to dreams. Their breaths rise and fall in soft, uneven rhythms. A dropped shoe lies forgotten near a door. A cloak hangs by the hearth, drying from an unexpected splash of mud. A cup left on a table reflects the last flame like a tiny crescent moon. These small still life moments are the closing scenes of medieval night. Outside, the village is hushed. The wind tiptoes. The trees whisper, but only to each other. A lone dog curls beside a post, tail wrapped over its nose, ears twitching at sounds too faint for human notice. The old well stands in the darkness, its rope swaying slightly as though remembering the many secrets traded beside it just hours before. Even the restless geese have tucked their heads beneath their wings, surrendering to the gentle dictatorship of sleep. Far above, the stars glimmer with ancient indifference, their light brushing the rooftops like a silent blessing. In one house, a father leans toward the embers and adds the smallest piece of wood not to rekindle a blaze, but simply to keep the coals warm until dawn. Sparks rise, then vanish. He stays there a moment longer than necessary, listening to the quiet. His thoughts are not dramatic. They never are. He wonders about the weather tomorrow. He thinks about a loose hinge on the barn door. He hopes the cow will behave, for once. And then, when his mind grows soft and his shoulders grow heavy, he finally stands and slips beneath the same blanket that shelters his family. In another home, an old widow sits awake a little longer, staring into the hearth the way others stare at the sea. The firelight flickers across her face, tracing the lines of a lifetime, lines etched by work, by loss, by laughter, and by the unremarkable passage of years. She hums a tune she has not sung in decades, a tune once shared, a tune now heard only by the wood, the ash, and the shadows on her wall. When she finally lies down, she does not feel lonely. The village is close, even in silence. The world is small, but not empty. As the hours deepen, the noises of night become the only music left. A snore in one cottage, a creaking shutter in another, the distant bleat of a sheep complaining in its sleep, the drip of water from a roof beam, the sigh of wind curling around a chimney. These sounds, gentle and unhurried, form the lullaby of a medieval village. There is no rush to morning. Night is long, and it belongs to rest. If anyone remains awake now, it is only by necessity, a new mother rocking her child, a shepherd stepping out to check the animals, or a priest finishing a whispered prayer before folding his robe. But even they move slowly, careful not to disturb the fragile stillness that blankets the homes around them. In this quiet hour, something becomes clear not to the villagers, but to us, gazing back from a world centuries away. The day they lived, with its strange entertainments, humble joys, muddy chaos, and imperfect laughter, was enough. Not extraordinary, not tidy, but enough. And in that enough, there is a softness that feels almost foreign to us, now a reminder that a life does not have to be spectacular to be complete. The village breathes, and then breathes again. The night settles deeper, as though pulling a second blanket across the rooftops. And soon, even the last waking thoughts fade. No one knows what tomorrow will bring. Perhaps rain, perhaps sunshine, perhaps a broken fence, a stubborn cow, or a reason to drag out the fiddle again. Whatever arrives, the villagers will meet it the same way they always have, with work, with worry, with humor, with community, and with the small, stubborn determination to find moments of joy in the cracks of their routine. For now, there is nothing left to chase, nothing left to fear, nothing left to do. The day has finished its story. The night has claimed its quiet, and the village, wrapped in darkness and straw and habit, sleeps. And so, our journey drifts to its final quiet breath. The village has gone still, the torches have softened into smoke, and the last echoes of footsteps have disappeared into the hush of the sleeping earth. In this silence, the medieval world closes its eyes, and we leave it just as we found it: simple, imperfect, restless, ridiculous, tender, and profoundly human. For all its strangeness, all its muddy chaos and unpredictable customs, the Middle Ages hold a gentle reminder that life does not need polish to have meaning. Happiness did not wait for luxury. Laughter did not rely on perfection. Joy did not hide behind grand achievements. It lived in the small things, in shared meals, shared gossip, shared chores, shared sleep, and shared silliness. Their world was rough, but their hearts were inventive. And in the absence of entertainment, they created their own. Not because they had time to waste, but because the spirit always needs a place to rest, to play, and to feel alive. When we look back at them across centuries of change, there is a quiet recognition that rises within us. We rush more, but worry the same. We have more, but long for the same feelings: belonging, connection, laughter, comfort, and love. We chase purpose, even when we do not have the words for it. We carry the same questions, even if our world feels louder, brighter, and harder to escape. And maybe, in a strange way, that is why tales like this calm us. They slow the rhythm of our thoughts. They remind us that life has always been messy, always been uncertain, always been stitched together by ordinary days and ordinary people doing their best. So as the village sleeps, let your own thoughts quiet as well. Let the worries of tomorrow soften and fade. Let the noise of the present drift far from your mind. Nothing needs solving right now. Nothing needs chasing. There is nowhere to run, no bell ringing in the square, no fields calling your name, no tasks waiting at the edge of dawn. For a moment, you can simply rest here in this stillness, where time moves slowly and the night asks nothing of you. Breathe in slowly. Feel your body sink a little deeper. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your mind settle. The world will continue turning without effort from you. You are allowed to pause. Even the busiest villages rested. Even the noisiest days ended in silence. Even in the Middle Ages, where survival was a daily chore, people slept, trusting that the morning would come. And it always did. Tonight, you can do the same. Trust the night to hold you. Trust your thoughts to soften. Trust that morning will arrive when it is ready. For now, there is only stillness and the gentle rhythm of your breath. Let it carry you the way an old lullaby might have carried a child sleeping on a straw mattress centuries ago. Thank you for wandering with me through this little corner of history, through muddy streets, candlelit rooms, chaotic games, and quiet firesides. It has been a strange journey, but a soft one. And I hope in some small way it helped your mind drift farther from the noise of the present and closer to rest. Sleep well. Dream gently. And wherever you are listening from morning or midnight, city or countryside, I wish you peace, warmth, and a deep, unbroken night of rest. Good night, my friend. Until the next story.